This is Ryan Levesque here, and welcome back to today's free mini course and this next installment on the 5 steps to making 6 figures online, selling nothing but information and expertise. If you're just joining us here, we're going to be covering what you missed in the first installment of this training, as well as talk about what we're going to be covering here today. But before we dive right in, I want to make sure that you can hear me okay, you can see me okay, and I'd love to know where you're watching this here from. And if you're just joining now for the first time, let me know, just joining. And if you caught the first installment of this a few days ago, let me know that you are back. And I'll let you use the comments inside the Facebook Live thread that we've got going on. So directly below the video on Facebook, we've got comments going. Let me know. Can you hear me okay? See me okay? Let me know where you're watching this from. And of course, let me know if you are back. You can just say, I'm back. Or if you're joining for the first time, you can let me know first time to let me know where we're at. And we're going to be diving in here in just a moment as I make sure that everything is working nice and tight here. So, hey, I see Robert from Eureka, California, and I see Colleen from Dallas. Saw the first installment and loved it. That's awesome to hear that. Anthony says, I am here and I am back. That's awesome, Anthony. Hey, Richard. Hey, Robert, back. Jolie from ATX, Austin, Texas. Ian from Stockholm, Sweden. Cody says, I can hear you and I can see you from Austin, Texas. John from Kansas. How's it going, John? And Anthony from Harlem, New York. Awesome to see you here, Anthony. And Stephanie from Washington. Stephanie is back. It's great to have you back, Stephanie. Mohammed says, thanks, Ryan, watching from Toronto, Canada. That's great to see that. Francois from Montreal. Welcome, Francois. And Cody says, I am back. It's great to have you back, Cody. Mohammed says, first time watching. Praddock says, I am back. It's great to have you back. Jeff says, Hurst, Texas, just watched the replay. That's awesome to hear that. Maureen from Missouri and Nils from Bend, Oregon. And Jill says, I am back. And Sharon says, we're back from Fountain Hills, Arizona. Janine and Sharon Shaw Elrod. Carol, I'm back. Hiva, it's awesome to have you back from Melbourne, Australia. Steve, back from Albany, New York. And Doreen saying, I'm just joining right here. Linda from Calgary, Canada. Awesome to have you here, Linda. And Anna back from the Netherlands. It's awesome. I love seeing so many of you from around the world. This is so cool. And with that being said, it looks like the audio and video are working just fine. So let's dive right in. So in this installment of this free mini course on the 5 steps to making 6 figures online, selling nothing but information and expertise, we are going to cover the very first step. As you see here, we're going to be covering what's behind this little piece of paper for the letter C. But before we do that, I want to just kind of bring everybody up to speed and set the stage for what we're talking about here today. If you missed the introduction to this free mini course, we talked about what do we mean by selling information and expertise? Like, what does that mean exactly? And in the comments, if you were here, let me know, what were some of the things that we talked about? What are some of the ways you can sell information and expertise? You can leave a comment to let me know some of your ideas. I'll share a few of them right now. Of course, we're talking what? We're talking digital products. We're talking digital courses. We're talking ebooks. We're talking physical books. We're talking membership sites. We're talking potentially coaching and consulting. We're talking masterminds. We're talking online and in-person workshops. Basically, what we're talking about are ways to sell your expertise or somebody else's expertise in the form of information. And we talked about some of the reasons why selling information and expertise is such a powerful idea, given the fact that it can be 100% profits. You can productize your knowledge. You can generate passive income and make money while you sleep. You don't have to be the expert yourself. You can work with other people either by hiring them or partnering with them. And we talked about how you can have one idea that you can repurpose, and that one idea can be repurposed into a course, into an online workshop where people work with you, and even in the form of consulting that you do one-on-one with other people. And then we introduced the concept of this in-up max model, the in-up max model, and that in every market you want to have an in, you want to have an up, and you want to have a max. And we talked about that at each of these different levels, there are different price points that exist in your market. And that your in is something that 100% of your market will buy. It's the first thing that they buy from you. It's the thing that gives you an in with them. And then from there, you might have 10% of people buy the next thing from you that is a 10x price increase. So if this is $100, this might be $1,000. And then we talked about your max, where you might have 1% of your market spend 100x with you. So if this is $100, this might be $1,000, this might be $10,000. Now every market's different. Your starting point might be $50 in your market. So this might be $50, this might be $500, this might be $5,000. But the math basically works out no matter what market you're in. And then we went through a few examples, right? A few examples of how to get to where you want to go. Whether you want to get from $0 to $10,000 a month and put yourself in the top 10% of all income earners in the United States, to go to $20,000 a month and go into the top 5% of all income earners, or the top 1% earning $40,000 a month. And I shared with you that for me, not to say that this will work for you, you might be faster, you might be slower, but for me, it took me 3 years, starting from scratch, to get to that point. And I shared the quote that one of my mentors passed along to me, that we tend to vastly overestimate what we can get done in 1 year, but vastly underestimate what we can get done in 3 years. Now, if you missed that training, what I highly recommend that you do is go to askmethod.com/get-in, and that will give you access to the replay of this training that you missed, so you can catch up on all the details and everything that you didn't get a chance to see, and of course get notified each time one of these installments is released in this free mini course series. And that brings us to today. We're gonna be talking about the first step in the 5 steps to making 6 figures online, selling nothing but information and expertise. And we're gonna be talking about this very first step, which starts with the letter C. And I'll go to the Facebook group now and say, are there any guesses on what you think the first step might be? Go ahead to the Facebook group, leave a comment. What do you think is behind this little piece of paper right here, behind number 1, step number 1, beginning with the letter C? Leave a comment in the Facebook thread. Let me know what you think your guess is. I'd love to go to the guesses here. Your guesses. What is your guess for what you think is behind door number 1? Any guesses? Gosh, I see Cynthia saying, I saw part 1, awesome. Anna is back, okay, like pre-text back, awesome. Nova says, so Sean says from Nova Scotia, ebooklets. Ed says, is it clarity? Anthony says, is it communication? Hiva says, is it connect? Lauren says, is it content? Meme says, communication. And these are all amazing guesses, right? These are all great guesses and certainly could be potentially what your first step is. But in our framework here today, in this mini course, the first step, step number 1, is choose. Now, what do I mean by choose exactly? Well, let's talk about choose. You see, when it comes to building a business online, the single most important choice that you need to make is as follows. Now, the conversation that we had yesterday and some of the questions that came through were things like, I don't know what to sell. I don't know what I could sell for $100, $1,000, or $10,000. I don't know what I need to do to raise my rates to be able to charge that kind of money. And those are all great questions, but they don't represent the question you want to be asking yourself right now. Because the single most important decision, the single most important choice that you make as an entrepreneur, as someone who's going to be selling information and expertise, who is already selling information and expertise, is not what. That's the wrong question to be asking. The right question to be asking is who. So in other words, the single most important choice that you have in front of you is not what you're going to sell, but to whom you're going to sell. In other words, who is your market? Who is your audience? Who are you going to serve? Now, you hear statistics out there of businesses and small business owners that fail. Something like 95% of all businesses fail within the first few years. And the reason for that, one of the biggest reasons at least, is because people fail to make the single most important choice in their business. And that is the decision of who, as in who you're going to serve. So now let's take a moment to talk a little bit about some of the biggest mistakes that people make around this choice. And there are three big mistakes that I want to talk about today. These don't represent all of the mistakes, but these represent three of the mistakes that I'd like to talk about because they're three of the biggest. Three of the ones that I see over and over and over again. And they're some of the biggest reasons why I see people fail, right? Because if you watch the earlier training, the first installment in this mini course, I think many people said, well, it sounds so easy when you put it in the terms that I've put it, but why do so many people fail? Well, the biggest reason why people fail, number one, is because they don't have the right blueprint or the right process. But number two, they make the wrong choice to begin with. And I'll talk about three of the biggest mistakes that people make when it comes to that choosing process, when it comes to that all-important choice of who you're going to serve. The first mistake is selling to people, any guesses on this one? Selling to people without money. Selling to people who don't have money. Now, it's obvious when I say this, right? But I can't tell you how many people reach out to me and they say, I have an ebook, I have a course, I'm thinking about creating a course, I'm a consultant, I'm thinking about creating a workshop, but nobody is buying. And when I ask the question of who are you selling to, the answer comes up and people say, the biggest challenge I run into is that my market doesn't have any money to spend. They are broke. And they get feedback all the time saying, I can't afford it, I can't afford it. So it's one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make. Now it's obvious maybe when I put it up here on this chart, but it's a mistake that I see over and over and over again. It's a mistake that you don't want to make. If you're relying on selling to people who are broke, who have no money, how do you expect to build an income around that, right? And I'll use an example. Imagine for a moment that you're a real estate agent. Now, as a real estate agent, you could sell a home that is worth $100,000. You could sell a home that is worth $1 million, or you could sell a home that is worth $10 million. Now, let's take a look at the numbers involved in that process. And let's assume for a moment that you get paid a 3% commission for the sale of the home. So if you sell someone's home worth one of those price points, you make 3% of that sales price. Now, when it comes to selling a home, the amount of time and effort that goes into selling that home is the same, right? It doesn't matter if you're selling a $100,000 home or a $10 million home, you still gotta do the same steps. You still gotta work roughly as hard. You still gotta put roughly as many hours into the process. With the $100,000 home, your 3% is worth $3,000. With the $1 million home, you're walking away with $30,000. And with the $10 million home, your commission now is $300,000. So think about that for a moment. If you sell one $10 million home, if you work with people who actually have money, it's the equivalent of selling 100 $100,000 homes. So my question to you is, what would you rather do? Would you rather sell one $10 million home or bust your butt to sell 100 $100,000 homes for the same commission? And it underscores the point that you want to focus on choosing a market where you are selling to people with money. And that takes us to the second big mistake that I see people make all the time. And it's one that actually came up in the first installment of this free mini course. And it's the mistake that I call, if you build it, they will come. Now, the way I see this mistake play out all the time, and I saw some comments around this on the first installment, is people will tell me, they'll say, hey, Ryan, I have this course that I've created. Or Ryan, I have this book that I've created. Or Ryan, I have this membership site. It's all created, it's all done. How do I find people to buy it? Now, it's the myth of if you build it, they will come. It's one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make. You see, if you build something, having something built is not enough for people to actually want it, for people to actually want to buy it. Instead, you want to first begin not with your product, not with what you're going to sell, but with who you're going to sell to. In other words, what is it that they want? You want to start with your market first, not your product. So the if you build it, they will come mistake is one that pops up all the time. And if you're watching this right now and saying, oh crap, I spent all this time creating a product, all this time creating a course, and nobody is buying it, well, the reason is because you just did things out of order. And that's why this first step in the process to making six figures online, selling information and expertise, begins with choosing who you're going to sell to first, figuring out what it is that they want, and then using that information to design your course, to design your workshop, to figure out how you're going to help them as a consultant, and so on and so forth. I'll pause here for a moment and hit the timeout button. Does that make sense? Is that making sense so far? I'll ask you to leave me a comment in the Facebook thread right now. And by the way, if you get to something in this today's training that's been an aha moment for you, it's been a takeaway, it's been an eye-opener, it's led you to a big sort of realization or insight that's come out of this, I invite you to press the heart button or the like button as fast as you can, as many times as you can. In fact, you know what? Before we move on to the third big mistake, let's practice this all together. So if you've got something, let's pretend for a moment that you've taken something from this free mini course that's had a big impact on you. What I want you to do right now, we'll all do this together, you'll see what it looks like, is on the Facebook thread, hit the like and the heart button as fast as you can, as many times as you can. So let's go ahead and do it now. We'll see how many hearts, how many likes we can get. And the reason for this is it's gonna be helpful as you're watching this to see what other takeaways some of the other folks who are watching this right now with you are having, and identify what things you might want to pay close attention to and things that you may want to write down in your notes. So again, hearts, 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 likes, likes, likes. I see them coming through. Awesome, awesome, awesome. This is great. So awesome, guys. Cool. So with that being said, we covered the first of the two big mistakes. Let's cover the third big mistake. This is one that one of my mentors passed along to me, and it's an important one. We talked about the importance of selling to people who have money. We talked about the importance of not making the mistake of if you build it, they will come. They won't come. You've got to figure out what it is that they want first and build what they want, not build what you think they need. But the third mistake is as follows. Pioneers get shot, but settlers get rich. What do I mean by that exactly? Well, what I mean by that is this. You see, there's this mistake that people make where they say, you know what, I want to come up with an idea that nobody else is doing. I want to be the first because there's this concept, and it's a fallacy, this concept that if you are the first to do something, that you are blazing new ground and therefore you are going to win. There's nobody else doing it. That's a great sign. The reality is, if nobody else is doing it, if nobody else is selling what it is that you think you want to sell, that is a huge warning sign. Pioneers get shot, settlers get rich. Now, if we look at the most successful companies in the world today, companies like Facebook, companies like Google, companies like Apple, none of those companies were pioneers. None of those companies were the first to develop what it is that they developed. If we look at Facebook, Facebook was not the first social network, right? We had things like MySpace and Friendster far before Facebook. Google was not the first search engine. We had Yahoo, we had Excite.com, we had AltaVista years before Google existed. Instead, what these companies did is they found a space that somebody else had already blazed the trail, somebody else had already pioneered, and they came in and they settled in that space, building a better mousetrap. Apple was not the inventor of the MP3 player. They saw a market that had been proven by other people, the pioneers, and they came in and they built a better mousetrap, starting with the iPod and eventually the iPhone. So we look at the most successful companies in history. It's not about blazing new trails. It's not about blazing new territory. It's not about being the first. If nobody else is doing what you're doing, that's not a good thing. That is actually a bad thing because pioneers get shot, settlers get rich. So with that being said, if you're just joining us right here, right now, you see this link here at the bottom of the screen. That link will get you access to all the previous and upcoming installments that either you may have missed or that will help you get notified when those installments are going to be released. You can go to that link at any time, askmethod.com/get-in. It's totally free. It's a totally free mini course that I'm doing on the 5 steps to making 6 figures online, selling nothing but information and expertise. Now, with these 3 big mistakes in mind, when it comes to this all-important choice, the single most important choice that you have as an entrepreneur, which is who are you going to serve, all other decisions stem from this. If you get this wrong, right? If you go into a space where you try to build it before they come, if you try to sell to people without money, if you try to create new space and be the first, be the pioneer, it doesn't matter. All the other steps, you could do them perfectly. It doesn't matter. You are setting yourself up to fail. This decision is that important. So what I want to talk about now is I want to introduce you to this concept that in every market, there are two sweet spots that you need to be mindful of, and you need to be in both of these sweet spots to succeed. Now, the first sweet spot is what we call the market size sweet spot. The market size sweet spot. And what that means is you don't want to be in a market that is too small, but at the same time, you also don't want to be in a market that is too big. Instead, on this y-axis here, you want to be right in the middle. You want to be right in the market size sweet spot. And the reason for that is simple. If you try to go into a market that's too small, there simply isn't enough opportunity. There isn't enough money to be made. Simultaneously, if you go into a market that's too big, then you're going into a market that you're going to be drowning in a sea of competition. And I'll give you an example of this. So one of my first successful businesses online selling nothing but information and expertise was in the orchid care space, as in teaching people how to care for the flower, orchids. This is a business that I took from nothing to $25,000 a month in income in less than 18 months. And eventually grew that one business to over $500,000 per year. And in that business, we have things like ebooks, digital courses, a membership site, and so on and so forth. So we follow the model that I introduced yesterday in this very specific space. Now, when I was faced with the all-important choice of what market I want to go into, I had a full range of things that I was looking at. So I was looking at anything within the gardening market or the gardening niche. Now, gardening in and of itself is a market that is far too big. There are literally millions of websites online on the topic of gardening. And I knew if I went into that space, I'd be drowning in a sea of competition. There's no way that I can compete with the big companies out there that have millions of dollars to spend on their business. Simultaneously, I also knew that I couldn't go into a market that was too small. Perhaps something like a very specific orchid variety, maybe only focusing on dendrobiums or vandas or oncidiums or phalaenopsis. Any one of those specific varieties was too small of a market. It was too specific. I knew I needed to be in this sweet spot, right in between. That's the first sweet spot that you want to be aiming for when you're deciding what market to go into. But it's not the only sweet spot. There's another sweet spot that you want to be looking for. And this sweet spot is called the market competition sweet spot. So we're looking at size, which is the number of people who are searching for information on this topic, the number of people who represent consumers in this market, and at the same time, we have another dynamic, which is the number of competitors in this market. And similarly, we don't want to go into a market that has too much competition, and that's kind of obvious, right? It's like you don't want to go into a market where there's, 1,000 competitors competing for one customer. At the same time, for the reasons that we just brought up, you don't want to go into a market that has too little competition. Too little competition is a sign that there isn't money to be made. So if you go online and do some searches and you can't find anybody else who's doing what you want to do, that is a red flag that you want to avoid. At the same time, if you go into a market online, you say, you know what, I want to build a business around this, and you find that there are hundreds of people trying to do the same exact thing in a relatively small market, it's going to be challenging to succeed. So what you're looking for is to be in the sweet spot, both in terms of market size, the number of people who search for help on the particular topic that you help people with, as well as the number of competitors who are in that space. And so where you want to be is right there. You want to be right here in the middle, where the competition sweet spot intersects with the market size sweet spot, right here in the middle. But being in both of these sweet spots isn't enough in and of itself to be successful as you make this all-important choice. The first step toward making six figures online, selling information and expertise, that is choosing the right market, in addition to that, you also have to keep in mind what we call the 5 market must-haves. Now, there are 5 market must-haves, 5 things that I look for anytime I enter a new market. Now, if you're not familiar with my story, you may not know that I've successfully entered 23 different niche markets online, predominantly selling information and expertise in each of these markets. And I've done things in such obscure markets like teaching people how to make jewelry using Scrabble tiles and origami paper, so the Scrabble tile jewelry market, to teaching people how to care for their orchids, orchid care, to teaching people how to improve their memory in my rocket memory business, to teaching people how to play better golf, play better tennis, teaching people how to have better health and lose weight, and so on and so forth. So I have a ton of experience in all these different markets, and I've learned in that process, based on the mistakes that I've made and where I've lost money, because I haven't gotten it right every single time, and where I've made money, that there are 5 things that are must-haves that I want to make sure I have before I start a new business, before I enter a new market, before I go into a new niche. I'm gonna hit the pause button right now, timeout, and ask you, are you curious to know what these 5 market must-haves are? If the answer is yes, if you want to know, say yes, tell me. Tell me in the Facebook comments, let me know. I want to make sure there's enough interest in this because gosh, if you're not interested in this, I don't want to waste your time. But if you are interested in this, I want to cover each of these things because I know how important this choice is in your business to choosing the right market for building your business and making that 6-figure income that you want to make online. So in the comments, let me know. Say, yes, Ryan, I want to know. I want to know what the 5 market must-haves are. Give me a brief second to take a sip of water here, and I'll check out the comments to see what kind of action we got going on right here today. So if you're just joining us right here, right now, this is the second installment in this free mini course on the 5 steps to making 6 figures online, selling nothing but information and expertise. We already covered the introduction. That was the first installment. Now we're covering the first step in that process, which is the step of choosing, as in choosing the right market, choosing the right model, choosing the right products to sell. It all starts with choosing the right market that we're talking about right here. Awesome. And I see Amy says yes, Steve says yes, Neil says yes, Meme says yes, John says yes, Joanna, Amy, James, Carlos, Enrique, Carlos, Jill. Anthony says, I'm not interested. Nah, I'm just playing. I'm interested. Yeah, I want to know. Linda says, absolutely. Jeff says, yes. Jan, Eric, Anna, Doug says, yes, I want to know. All right. You guys are awesome. So let's go through the 5 market must-haves together. So these are 5 things that I'm looking for before I go into any new market. And so if you're thinking about starting a new business, expanding your business, maybe pivoting your business, maybe deciding what area do you want to focus on for selling information and expertise online? There are 5 checkboxes, 5 criteria that I look for and I recommend you look for in your business. And the first one is making sure the market you're going into is what we call an evergreen market. Now, what do I mean by that exactly? An evergreen market is a market that isn't going away. It's a market that is here to stay. It's a market that is going to be around 10 years from now and probably was around 50 or 100 years ago. So examples of markets that are not evergreen are fad markets. Things like fidget spinner, Pokemon Go, things like iPhone 4S chargers, things that come and go. Now, contrast that with markets that have been around and are likely to be around for decades to come. Things like orchid care or gardening, things like reading, things like fishing, hunting, playing guitar. These are hobbies and these are niches that have been around for 100 or more years and are likely to be around for the next 100 years. Now, the reason it's so important to go into an evergreen market is, if you're like me, I am very attracted to the idea of working hard to build something once. Like if I build a course, or if I do a workshop, or if I build a membership site, gosh, I don't want to have to update that thing every month or every 6 months or every year. I want to build something that I can create once that will make me money over and over and over again. And I want the same thing for you. I want you to be able to work hard once, to build something that's gonna make you an income over and over and over again. Now, I learned this the hard way, learned from my mistakes. One of my first markets that I went into, I mentioned this earlier, is teaching people how to make Scrabble tile jewelry, how to make jewelry using Scrabble tiles from the board game and combining them with origami paper. Now, this was something that was a huge craze back in 2006 and 2007. You probably haven't heard of it unless you were part of this craze. And the reason for that is it was a massive fad. It was something that was all over the internet. It was all over the website Etsy.com. People couldn't get these things fast enough. And I thought, oh my gosh, we've hit pay dirt. We've hit a gold mine. This is incredible. And we started teaching people how to make this jewelry. We were selling 10 copies a day, 20 copies a day, 30 copies a day, 40 copies a day of our little ebook tutorial online that taught people how to make this jewelry. And I thought, oh my gosh, like we're gonna go to the moon. Our business grew from $1,000 a month to $2,000 a month, $3,000 a month, $4,000 a month, $8,000 a month. And I thought, oh my gosh, we're gonna be making a 6-figure income selling this. Well, as quickly as the market took off, the market crashed. The craze was over before we knew it, and we were back to square one. So the next time I started a new business, I said, I wanna go into a space that's gonna stay and be here to stay. And so I looked at the oldest hobbies that existed in America. And one of the oldest hobbies in America is, you've probably guessed it, gardening. Gardening is one of the longest lasting hobbies in America. It's been around for hundreds of years, and I expect it to be around for another 100 years. So as I started thinking about, well, what next business should we start? I thought about, well, what are some of the sub niches within the gardening space? And that is how we arrived at teaching people how to care for orchids. Orchids is in the flower. Orchids have been around for over 60 million years on this planet, and there's no signs of them slowing down. They've been around since almost the time of the dinosaurs. They've been around for tens of millions of years, and there's no sign that orchids are gonna be disappearing anytime soon. So I thought it was a pretty safe bet that if we focus on orchid care, we'd be building an evergreen business in an evergreen market. Now, choosing an evergreen market isn't enough in and of itself. There's a second condition, a second must-have that's just as important. And this must-have is choosing an enthusiast market. What do I mean by enthusiast? Well, an enthusiast market is in contrast to a problem solution market. So a problem solution market would be something like when you solve a problem, you immediately have fixed the problem and never want to deal with it ever again. So an example of that would be something like if you have a flooded basement, right? If your basement gets flooded, you want to fix that, solve it, and never worry about it ever again. Wart removal is another problem solution market. If you have a wart, you want to fix the wart, take care of it with medication, and never have to worry about it ever again. Now contrast that with an enthusiast market like a dog market. Let's, for example, pretend that you're gonna focus on serving dog owners, maybe dog owners of a certain breed, maybe dog owners who are specifically owners of Chihuahuas, right? So if you serve Chihuahua owners are incredibly passionate about their pets, about their animals. You'll see Chihuahua owners, they'll buy all sorts of things for their pet. They'll buy food, they'll buy books, learning about how to care for them. They'll buy little clothes for when it gets cold. They'll buy doggy bowls, they'll buy doggy Christmas ornaments, they'll buy doggy paintings and pictures. Gosh, people who own Chihuahuas, or really any breed for that matter, can't get enough of their dogs. They're incredibly enthusiastic, they're enthusiasts in the market. And when I say enthusiasts, what I mean is these are people who will be consumers in this market for months and months and months, if not years and years and years. And so what it means is you don't have a very brief window of opportunity to sell to someone in that market. You could sell them something today, sell them something again next week, sell them something again next month, sell them something again next year. They can become a customer of yours for many, many, many years. So orchid care is a perfect example of an enthusiast market. Someone might come into this market, have an orchid that, excuse me, the one orchid becomes two become four become 8. Before you know it, they have an entire greenhouse filled with orchids. Many orchid enthusiasts will fill their entire home with orchids. An orchid will die, they'll replace the orchid. They become orchid fans for life. So it's a perfect example of an enthusiast market. So, and that brings us to market must-have number 2, the importance of having an enthusiast market in addition to being an evergreen market. Now we're gonna cover market must-have number 3, which is what I call making sure your market has the 10K problem. What do I mean by a 10K problem exactly? Well, what I mean by that is this. When you're figuring out who to serve, it's not enough, for example, if you're gonna serve Chihuahua owners, to just start selling Chihuahua mugs and Chihuahua Christmas ornaments and things like that. See, when we're selling information and expertise, it's important to identify what is the burning problem that they are solving in their market. What is the problem that's caused their hair to catch on fire, so to speak, that they absolutely need to solve right here, right now? And specifically, when I'm talking about a 10K problem, is finding a problem that has the potential to go from a 1K problem to a 10K problem. Now, when I say 1K and 10K, you can think about this as high dollar amount problems, not necessarily literally a $10,000 problem like it costs $10,000 to solve, but instead a problem that has just a high pain point, right? You think about a dollar problem, that's like a problem that nobody really cares about solving. A $10,000 problem is like, oh my gosh, this is a big problem I need to solve right here, right now. So you're looking for markets that specifically have a 10K problem. Now, oftentimes, the circumstances need to be just right for a problem to go from being a 1K problem to a 10K problem. And I'll give you an example. In the dog market, a 1K problem would be like you have a dog who pees on the rug, right? So if you have a dog that pees on the rug, that's frustrating. It's annoying. It's a pain in the butt. And it's one thing that you probably want to solve. You probably can't stand that your dog pees on the rug. You got to clean it up every single time. It's so frustrating. It's like you wish the dog would just not pee on the rug. It's a frustrating problem that you want to solve. But that in and of itself isn't necessarily a big enough issue for someone to go online and spend money for your information and expertise to solve that problem. It has to transform into what we call a 10K problem. So what's a 10K problem? A 10K problem is when a 1K problem is presented within a certain set of circumstances that makes it a much bigger deal. I'll give you an example. Let's pretend for a moment that you're taking your dog on a trip, right? You're taking your dog on a trip. You're gonna go on an airplane for the first time and take your dog to travel to the other side of the country. Well, the pee-pee problem that you had of the dog peeing on your rug at home, which was a 1K problem, all of a sudden is a much bigger problem because you don't want to be the guy or the girl on the airplane with the dog who's peed on the plane. You don't want to be the one that everyone's looking at, giving nasty looks and dirty looks and saying, what's wrong with your dog? It stinks. What are you doing? Pee-pee all over the floor, pee-pee at the airport. You don't want to be dealing with that. So you're saying, oh my gosh, this pee on the rug problem, I've got to solve this right here, right now, before we go on this trip. Fido, we need to fix this problem today. So it's taken this 1K problem and transformed it into a 10K problem. And those are the circumstances necessary where someone will go online, do a search to solve that problem, whether it's peeing on the rug, whether it's barking, whether it's biting, whether it's not coming when called, whether it's jumping, whatever problem it may be, that they need to solve it right here, right now, and they're willing to part with a sum of money because they are at this desperation point that they need to fix it fast. So that's the third market must-have, a market that has a 10K problem that you can solve. And that takes us to market must-have number 4, which is not just a 10K problem, but you also want to have future problems as well. What do I mean by that exactly? You want to make sure that when you're choosing your market, this all-important choice, that you're not just picking a market that has one problem that people run into. You want to make sure that after you've helped them solve this first problem with your information and expertise, whether it's through an ebook, a digital course, a membership site, an online workshop where people are working with you, whatever it may be, that there are additional problems that you can help people solve. So for example, the dog market is a perfect case of this, because after you solve the pee-pee problem with our fictitious dog owner, and they say, oh my gosh, you're amazing, like, I trust you, like, what else can you help me with? They're gonna wanna go to you to solve all the other problems that they have, like the fact that the dog is a picky eater, like the fact that the dog doesn't come when they're called, like the fact that the dog pulls on the leash and is a pain in the butt to walk, like the fact that the dog barks at other dogs and barks at other cats and barks at other cars, like the fact that the dog bites strangers and people that they're not familiar with. These are all future problems that you can help this person solve, where they will not become a customer once with you, but they will purchase from you over and over and over again. So for example, in the market that I serve, which is online entrepreneurs, and specifically people who are aspiring to become experts or sell their expertise and information online, I help people choose their market. I help people build their email list. I help people figure out what to sell. I help people figure out what their product should be. So there's a number of challenges and questions that people run into in the market that I serve, and I love helping people solve each of these problems. In the orchid care market, another example of a market that I've served, some of the challenges that people run into are as follows. One of the challenges, people will have an orchid that is flowering, and all the flowers will fall off the stem, and they can't get it to reflower. One of the beautiful aspects of orchids, when you care for them the right way, is that they can reflower over and over and over again, and they can live for decades. Like the same orchid plant can live for 50, 60, 70, 80, 100 years or more. So it can reflower season after season. But if you don't take good care of it, if you don't know how to give it the proper growing conditions, it can flower once, all the flowers fall off, and it never flowers again. So it's a huge frustration point. That's one of the problems. Another problem is how to repot your orchid. After an orchid outgrows its pot, it needs to be repotted into a bigger pot. But the problem is, when you do that, the orchid is very fragile. You can kill it, you can injure it, you can damage it. And many times people will repot their orchid, the orchid will die, and they get frustrated. So it's another problem. Another problem that people run into in the orchid market is, what do you do when you have yellow leaves? When the leaves start to turn yellow, what does that mean? Does it mean too much sunlight, not enough sunlight, too much water, not enough fertilizer, the wrong potting conditions, the wrong humidity? What are the reasons why? So there are a number of challenges that someone can run into in the orchid market, where they will spend money multiple times to solve these different challenges. So you want to make sure you go into a market that has future problems that you can help people solve, so that they will become a customer with you for years and years and years. And that takes us to our fifth and final market must-have. And that is market must-have number 5, which is players with money. Players with money. What do I mean by that exactly? Well, this is a term that was introduced to me by one of my mentors, and it underscores the importance of not making one of the mistakes that we talked about in the 3 big mistakes, and that is trying to sell to people without money. You see, you want to make sure that whenever you go into a market, that there's a certain population of people in that market that are called players with money. People who will spend a crazy amount of money on that thing. So the golf market is a perfect example of this. Golfers are notorious for spending crazy amounts of money, not only on equipment like their golf clubs and golf balls, but on things like trips to go to the Masters, or trips to go on a golf cruise around the world. Golfers will spend $10, $20, $30, $40,000 on a cruise to travel through the Caribbean, through the British Isles, to play at some of the most iconic courses in history. And you might be saying to yourself, why would anybody spend that kind of money? Well, that's exactly what you're looking for in your market. You want a subset of people that spend what the outside world would consider to be irrational sums of money on that particular hobby or that particular area of their life. Car enthusiasts are the same way. Orchid enthusiasts are the same way. You'll have people that will spend literally thousands of dollars a year on new orchids, on hydroponic equipment, on growing lights, on greenhouses, on trips to South America to do rainforest tours to view orchids in the wild. So you want to make sure, whatever market you're going into, that there's evidence of PWMs, players with money. So those are the 5 market must-haves. You want to make sure that you have market must-have number 1, an evergreen market, a market that's not going away tomorrow. Don't make the same mistake that I've made. You want to make sure that you're going after an enthusiast market, a market that someone will become a customer not just now, but will become a customer of yours for years and years into the future. You want to make sure you go into a market where you can solve a 10K problem. What is that 10K problem in your market? It's a problem where someone's hair is on fire and they need to solve it right here, right now. You want to make sure that you also have future problems to solve. So unlike a problem solution market like wart removal or water damage in a flooded basement where you solve the problem once and you just move on, you want to make sure that there are future problems to solve as well. And last but not least, you want to make sure that there are players with money in your market. You want to make sure that there's evidence of people spending irrational sums of money. And if you were part of the first installment of this training, I know some of you asked, well, how would I possibly sell something for $1,000 or $10,000 in my market? Well, you want to make sure that there's evidence of PWMs because they are the ones that are going to spend that money. They're the ones that are going to spend money on an orchid trip around the world. They're the ones that are going to spend money on a doggy experience for their pet. They're the ones that are going to spend money learning how to brew beer from home and go to an actual beer brewer's workshop in some part on the other side of the world or some part of the other side of the country and spend time in a 5-star hotel and learn how to brew beer, spending thousands of dollars in the process. And all these things exist. And I know this because I've seen it in the markets that I've gone into. So that being said, I want to hit the pause button right now on our training so far today. And I'm going to ask you 2 questions. The first question is this. Based on everything that we've covered in this installment of this free mini course on the 5 steps to making 6 figures online, selling information and expertise, what has been your single biggest takeaway today? What has been your single biggest takeaway so far right here, right now, today? Do me a favor, in the Facebook comments, post a comment with what your single biggest takeaway has been so far in this free mini course. Post it in the comments right here, right now. That's the first thing. The second thing is this. What's your single biggest question that you would love for me to cover or answer? So in other words, if you could ask Ryan anything related to what we've covered so far in this free mini course, what's your single biggest question that you've been wondering about that you'd love for me to give you an answer to? Post your question in the comments. And you can simply use the word takeaway in all caps in your first comment to tell me what your single biggest takeaway is. And you can simply use the word question to let me know what question you'd love for me to cover in a future installment of this free mini course. And you can go ahead and do that right here, right now. Before I give you a preview for what's coming up in the next installment in this free mini course. So go ahead, do that right now, post a comment. And while you're doing that, I also want to take a moment to let you know that if you miss the first part of this training, or you want to get notified before the next installment is released so you don't miss a second of this free mini course, go to this link right here, askmethod.com/get in. You'll get to a simple page that has a green button. You'll just click on that button. Tell me a little bit about where you are right now in your journey, enter your email address, and I'll make sure that we notify you before the next training is released so you don't miss a second of it. And on that page, you can also catch up on any of the past trainings in this free mini course that you may have missed along the way. Now that takes us to the next step that we're going to be getting to in the next installment of this training. Before I do that, I want to take a moment to read some of the biggest takeaways that have come through so far right here today. So biggest takeaways. Linda says, absolutely everything. Nils says, 5 market must-haves. Biggest takeaways, Anna says, 5 market must-haves. James says, narrow my niche to money clients. Neil says, 5 market must-haves. Joel says, planning is absolutely key. Day says, biggest takeaway, deciding that I want to work with players with money. Players with money is what Anna says. Thomas says, choose your niche wisely. Absolutely. Linda says, takeaway, must-haves were enlightening. Thank you. John says, takeaway, the 5 market must-haves. Joanna says, the 2 sweet spots in every market. Andrew says, love the market must-haves. And Janice says, the 5 market must-haves. And that takes us to the end of today's installment in this free mini course. Now, in the next installment, we're going to cover the next step in the process, which is represented right here. 5 steps to making 6 figures online, selling nothing but information and expertise. And if you're excited to join me in this next installment, I'd love for you to leave a final comment to let me know, Ryan, I'm going to see you in the next one. Let me know, say, Ryan, see you next time. See you next time. And with that being said, I want to wish you an amazing rest of your day. I want to wish you an amazing rest of your week. And I look forward to sharing the next installment in this free mini course with you as soon as it's released. And one last time, if you're just joining us right here, right now, you go to this link right here, askmethod.com/get-in, to catch up on what you've missed so far, the all-important pieces of information that have led us to where we are today, including the all-important intro of the in-up-max model that led to this very first step that we covered here today. You'll also get notified the next time an installment is released in this mini course by going to that link, askmethod.com/get-in. And for those of you who are going to be joining me in the next installment, I look forward to seeing you on the inside. All right, guys, take care, talk soon, have a great rest of your day, and I'll catch you on the flip side. Bye.